Hello, everyone. Welcome to AMT's Tech Trends podcast, where we discuss the latest manufacturing technology, research, and news. I am the Director of Technology, Benjamin Moses, and today's episode is sponsored by AM Radio. And I'm here with
Stephen Lamarca, Technology Analyst.
Steve. How you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Yeah?
Dude, buttery smooth intro. That was amazing.
I've been working on it for the past 2 years. I don't know if you noticed.
Oh, man. That's impressive.
So, before we get into some articles, we've been doing some stuff on our own. I know you've been doing some self-analysis.
So, well, not self-analysis, but like, so, you know, I'm a big fan of maintenance. I love me some good maintenance. But seeing as I don't have a machine tool to maintain, well, I mean, I have one, but it's like bulletproof, and nothing ever goes wrong. And frankly, it's brand new. It hasn't,
That's true.
You know, hasn't made enough chips yet. But what has made enough chips, well, in a certain way,
Not in a good way.
my vehicles.
Right.
I recently, well, actually a while ago now, I did something really fun and had the suspension on my motorcycle adjusted for me and my weight.
Nice.
It's a Japanese motorcycle.
Sure.
Probably designed for, well, the designers and team of engineers that made it and conceived it probably didn't have somebody as big and as heavy as me in mind when, you know, they set up the suspension.
So kind of like airplane seats?
Exactly. Well, yeah, for any American for that matter. But fortunately, a lot of, you know, not necessarily premium, but nicer, you know, bigger engine motorcycles typically have fully adjustable suspensions. Mine is. Figured, you know, I've got 2,500 miles on it now. It's probably a good idea to have it adjusted to my weight and size and whatnot. I've adjusted other things for my size and fit, but let's do the suspension. And the suspension, to be fair, is already great.
Nice.
But when you pay for a fully adjustable suspension, why not have it fully adjusted to you? And I did, and crazy enough, so I take it to this shop. A guy's been doing it for 30 years. He knows what he's doing. And he's like, we need to increase the rear suspension to, I think he said something like, you know, 0.95 Newton meters per kilogram.
The spring rate.
Something
So he's actually
sure. Spring rate for that. And adjust the preload.
Okay.
Adjust the bound and rebound, or compression and rebound.
Sure.
Of the actual shock absorber, the dampers.
Right.
And did the front fork as well, because, you know, if you do the rear, you have to do the front. And what's crazy is, you know, he's measuring everything. He's measuring it with the bike by itself, measuring it with me on the bike, and making these adjustments, and he's stiffening everything up. He's making it stiffer.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, geez. He's like really cranking this thing up. And it's already like, you know, a pretty stiff suspension when I ride it around. Well, it's certainly stiffer than other motorcycles I've ridden.
Right.
And I haven't exactly ridden like a track bike before, but and this is a sportier bike, but he's you know, turning up the stiffness and like, you know, the ratios on everything.
Right.
And I'm just like, dude, this ride is going to be, it's gonna be like driving. It's gonna be like riding through Baghdad, you know, hitting bumps
everything.
and stuff. And he's like, "All right, take it for a spin around the block or two."
Sure.
And I take it out, and it is like on a cloud.
Really?
I'm like, how did this happen? And I come back, and I you know, reach for the brakes to come to a complete stop at a stop sign, and the brakes are more grabby.
Wow.
And I'm like, this makes no sense. It makes no sense. We adjusted the suspension. We made it stiffer. Why does it feel softer?
Yep.
And how does adjusting the suspension make the brakes feel better?
Right.
And he explained all the physics to me, and it made sense. You know, he's just like, well, by stiffening the suspension for your weight, which is heavier than, you know, what they anticipated.
Right.
Sure, it doesn't. Now the suspension doesn't travel as fast, doesn't travel as far, and it is firmer. But now, when you hit, like, you know, larger bumps, it doesn't bottom out.
Right.
So the suspension can now work fully and fully absorb bumps when you hit them, as opposed to absorbing some little bumps at slow speeds. it can now fully absorb large bumps at slow speeds and little bumps at high speeds,
Nice.
and you won't feel it.
That's cool.
Well, you can feel
Sure,
it, but you won't feel it in a negative way. And because the front is tightened up, now the fork doesn't dive. The front doesn't dive as much under braking, so the brakes feel stronger for that reason. It's
cool.
It's simple Newtonian mechanics.
I actually do enjoy vehicle dynamics. I studied a little bit of dynamics in school and understanding suspension settings. It's a very interesting course. So, and also it reminds me of my first car that I bought, 2001 Volkswagen Golf. And after, of course, the warranty died down, I said, let's start modifying this thing.
Yeah.
I did something very similar. I looked at suspension first, and then I modified. I went to like a Cup series where it's a set of stiffer shocks and springs and lowering kit a little bit. And I kept the same size tires. And, of course, when you lower the car with like little 15-inch little guy tires, every time I went over a speed bump, I definitely scraped the oil pan.
Oh, my God.
So every time I'm changing the oil, I'm trying to get that plug out. I'm like, oh, there's more scratches on there.
Yeah. Oh, man. That's brutal. That's really scary.
It's not fun.
Some people, so I'm part of, sadly, I still, I'm still a user of Facebook.
Sure.
And I'm on some groups in there, and one of the groups I'm with is for other people that own a similar car to me, either BRZ or FRS or 86, what have you. They're all the same. They're all made by Subaru and paid for by Toyota. But a lot of people like to lower those because they're all kids.
Right.
That,
And it's funny, it's a cascade series of events because at some point the aluminum oil pan was just getting so beat up that I guess either someone afterward, they went to a steel pan, which is actually shorter. So
Gotcha.
I had to have the
Did
oil
it have
pan
like
changed.
the baffles in it so you could corner better?
No.
Okay.
It's a Golf.
Wasn't fancy.
No.
But but those are sporty cars.
Not 2001.
Okay,
it's
fair
not.
enough.
It's not the GTI. It was just a 4-door.
Oh, gotcha.
It had the cool engine in it. It had the 1.8 turbo, but not the. It was 4-door.
Gotcha.
And then I put a racing seat in there. I almost forget that, but it was so much fun.
Yeah.
We took a couple of long road trips, like driving to the Tail of the Dragon, which is like 8 hours, and 8 hour in a racing seat, non-adjustable racing seat too. Luckily, I did that in my youth. I would not do that now.
Wow. Yeah, as cool as racing seats are, don't get me wrong, I think they are awesome. I'm kind of glad I haven't gone to one.
And I did have a harness. I had a seatbelt, the standard seatbelt, and a racing harness in there.
Yeah.
So once I got on the tail, I did wear the harness, and being pinned into your seat, not moving around, it's an amazing experience.
There's a cheat to do that. It's not exactly the same thing. Well, it's far from the same thing, but like I tell Melissa whenever we go on a mountain road that's really windy and we're definitely going to take it harder, pull your seatbelt all the way out.
Right.
Pull it all the way out and then let it go in.
Sure.
And that's a thing. That's like a feature of that all seatbelts of any car have that not a lot of people think about and even know what it's for.
Yeah.
But it is. I don't know if it's for securing luggage.
Oh, I know what you mean. Yep.
But it actually works best when you're doing some spirited driving.
Sure.
Because it doesn't let you, especially in long high G corners that don't gradually get to a high G.
Right.
It doesn't allow you to swing out of the way. Yeah. It doesn't pull you out of the way because when you pull the seatbelt all the way out and then let it go back in, it's locked.
Right.
So it doesn't come out anymore until you unbuckle the seatbelt.
That's cool. That's a good hack.
It's a really cool hack.
Yep.
Not a lot of people know about it, but it is great. I don't think a lot of people understand how important a good seat is for keeping you in place. You don't just get a racing seat because it looks cool or it's lightweight.
Right.
It's they are designed to hold you in place.
Yep.
Everybody that, even when I got in my car when the car first came out, and I sat down in it, and it was wow, this makes me feel really insecure. I can feel love handles going all the way up and down my body.
Right.
And the reason is because it's cradling you to hold you in place while you go around corners really hard.
Steve, let's pivot to the word of the year.
Word of the year, goblin mode.
Speaking of racing, I thought goblin mode would be a good fit in.
The Oxford Dictionary officially announced like a couple days ago that the 2022 word of the year is goblin mode.
Have you ever used that in a sentence?
No, but I've heard the youth use it. It's like I'd
okay.
assume it's like lit or it's kind of mid. For real.
Something 20 years, people 20 years younger than me would say.
Yeah, keep it a stack, on God.
I appreciate that. That's going to look great in the transcript, by the way.
I feel bad for the transcriber.
Steve, you want to tell us about our sponsor for today?
Our sponsor for today, AM Radio, is the new podcast from Additive Manufacturing Media. Join editors Pete Zielinski, Stephanie Hendrickson, and Julia Hyder as they share stories of companies succeeding with 3D printing today, talk about emerging trends, and discuss the future opportunities and potential for AM in the context of the larger manufacturing landscape. New episodes are published every other week. Subscribe now on Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts. Tune into Additive.
Thanks, Steve.
You bet.
I got a couple articles here, and the first one I want to get to is from Science Daily, and it's actually, I think it's published from one of their Nature communication journals. It's a weird tangent, but what they derive from here is researchers use ultrasound waves to move objects hands-free, which is interesting. Hands-free is...
Use ultrasonic sound waves to move objects. So, okay, this brings two things to mind.
Sure.
Number one, acoustics.
Yes.
And, number one is two companies, acoustics in our industry, the people that did like the machine tool spindle that vibrates at an ultrasonic frequency for cooling or I don't know, some reason. It was really cool. Same guy that made that patent for acoustics. I've mentioned this before. The same patent actually is now used by Fabrasonic to use ultrasonic waves to weld sheets of metal together. It's a type of additive manufacturing now.
Yep.
That's really cool.
That's really cool. So
and also ultrasonic. Does that mean like super high frequencies?
Super high frequencies. We can get into like the frequency range that they're looking at, but I
want to hear about it.
We can, but it gets into like the energy behind that, and the article covers a lot of different things. You know, the research was done from Minnesota Twin City researchers discovered a new method to move objects using ultrasound, and what they're interested in is contactless manipulation, and they're really looking for applications like optics and electromagnetic applications like drives and things like that. So it's a smaller market segment, I think, but it's a very interesting applications because what they're doing, and I need to get into a little bit more, but because it's fairly fascinating. And to be honest, the article also gets into they've known that they can use light and sound to move objects. That's been around for a while. I think they've done it on like the particle level, using light to move stuff. Right?
Gotcha.
But now they're trying to expand that concept up into larger objects. So that's why they're looking at
just buy an awful sound system.
Exactly.
Has too much sub bass. Now that's subsonic, to be fair.
And they're looking at, so it's a combination of the source, so the ultrasound itself, but also they're looking at possibly coupling what they want to move with metamaterials too. Yeah. So they're using metamaterials on the outside to help move stuff, using ultrasound as an energy source to actuate the metamaterials for manipulation of the objects.
Or like like a non-Newtonian material. You can activate it or deactivate it with ultrasonic sound waves, stuff that we won't hear. So it's not like it'll bother you. That's really cool.
Yep. So it's a very interesting look at being able to transfer, the sound, moving this object around, and they're looking at very precise movement too. So it's not like they can move it across the room because that energy level would be outrageously high and probably kill someone getting in that way.
Sure.
But, realistically,
shattered glass.
They're looking at very small and very accurate manipulation of these objects. So it's you could have, and I've seen that quite a bit. So a couple of years ago, I looked at Disney actually doing animatronics research on coupling pneumatics and electromagnetic drives for animatronics, and that cascades into robotics. The reason they're looking at that is the speed and efficiency of coupling both those two to mimic human motion.
Right.
Because if you had just electromagnetic drive, it's going to be a little slower, but pneumatic drives are a little faster in some scenarios.
Yeah.
So they couple those two. So I think this is another progression in robotics where we're seeing energy sources being added to robotics or changing how robotics manipulate objects quite a bit. Now, the scenario into manufacturing obviously going to have some limitations, but being able to manipulate objects with different end-of-arm tooling is also, a big shift in the market too.
Wow.
So I thought it was a very interesting
That
article.
is really cool. Do you happen to have, you said you had the frequency measurements in front of you. Do you know what?
No, I don't.
Okay. Because I know, like when you hear a really awful sound system and that has way too much sub bass, that sub-bass frequencies are coming from the subwoofer speaker.
Right.
And subwoofers typically operate in the 5 to 10 hertz range.
Sure.
So that's subsonic.
Right.
For a lot of people can hear below 10 hertz.
Yeah.
But it's almost unanimously agreed upon that nobody can hear below 5 hertz.
Right.
But going below 5 hertz is when you get really annoying, windows rattling and stuff in your house or apartment. If you're one of those people that likes to annoy your neighbors, that's when you make really annoying rattling around your house. That's your sub bass range,
Right.
10 hertz and below. The really highs. Well, first off, speakers. I just want to bring up this really fun, cute thing real quick. So for good balanced sound, you want 2 types of speakers on each channel. For your mid to lows or mids to bass, you want a woofer.
Sure.
And for your mids to highs, you want a tweeter.
Sure.
If you want even more lows, you get a subwoofer.
Right.
And if you want even more highs and like really sharp and piercing or airy, sparkly, and bright highs, you will get a super tweeter speaker. But what gets right in the middle of the perfect mids? Do you know what that speaker's called?
No.
A squawker.
A squawker.
I just learned that the other day.
That's interesting. I never heard of that. And I've researched speakers for quite a while, so thanks, Steve.
You bet.
I learned goblin mode and squawker.
You're the word.
The next article I have is controversial. So this is from Electro Magazine. It's actually, they published a white paper, so you have to input your info to get the full white paper. And I thought it's a good look. And the stance I'm taking from this is, it's similar to the stance we've been taking in general. 5G is cool. 5G cellular communication is cool. But realistically in manufacturing, if you want faster speeds and you want to be able to keep up with technology as it's progressing, look at Wi-Fi 6. So
I didn't even know that existed.
Wi-Fi is your wireless communication. The word itself, Wi-Fi, doesn't mean anything. That's an actual fact. It's just a name that they wanted to call the standard. So Wi-Fi, they've gone through several progressions, 4 when it looks at 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz. And then they went to Wi-Fi 5, which is mainly 5 gigahertz. And now they've gone to Wi-Fi 6, and it's still 2.4 and 5, but what they've done is they're increasing the speed and the bandwidth within the different standards.
Right. Voice crack. What a little nerd.
And the reason I bring this up is, we've gone through our own migration here. So we updated our network infrastructure here a little while ago. And, I was taking a step back to look at how do companies keep up with technology, especially infrastructure technology, right? So cellular communication is not easy to keep up with, especially, if you talk about scale, right? It's crazy. Even trying to keep up with your phone, right? Yeah, it's one, I keep my phones longer than I should, but it depends on your strategy. So for me, I go till it's actually end of life. Like the company says that we're not supporting the OS anymore. So that's probably like the 7-year range, 5 to 7-year range. But realistically, by the time new things are being published, so even if you don't buy the latest and greatest, realistically, you're looking at maybe 2 to 3 year cycle on that type of device.
That's the ideal range.
Right. And if you look at to your laptops on the front, just in your own infrastructure, our warranty period is roughly 2 to 3 years. So after warranty, then you're taking risk.
Yeah, we get a new laptop every 3 years.
Yeah, we've been shifting to a 2 to 3 year time frame for laptops, right? So even the leases for laptop are roughly that time frame, maybe 4 years at the most. The data infrastructure is going to be along the same lines, right? We're seeing a progression of faster throughput on networks. So, we're seeing, 2.5 gig speeds on network structures, 5 gigs, and now 10 gigs is coming fairly commercially available. And that's over, standard CAT cable. Obviously, it's, CAT 6. My friend Scott had
CAT 6E.
I have to see what standard. I think he had a friend who's moving back to Korea, and for some reason had Cat 8 cable.
Wow.
Did you know about Cat 8?
I did not.
That's cool. I don't know what speeds there are. He must be doing something kind of interesting, but back to the point of technology progression, right? So if you are using wireless communication on your floor for, wireless to, like AMRs, right? You've got a ton of traffic like that where you do have true wireless devices or even communicating through tablets or other communication devices on the floor. It still makes sense to try and keep up with more Wi-Fi 6 because I feel like the Wi-Fi standards, changing your wireless access points is going to be easier than changing your cellular communications if you're using that on the floor.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And when we upgraded our network here in the office, I was like, why are we doing this? Our network our internet's always been awesome here.
Right.
And Sean even asked that, our IT guy asked that to the technician who was installing the new access ports.
Yep.
Access terminals, whatever, the new routers.
Right.
And the network hardware. And the guy was just answered him, and he was like, well, you wouldn't keep your phone more than 2 years, would you? Why would you expect your network hardware to perform for more than 2 years? Especially with the evolution of these standards. I knew about 5G, and I remember it's funny how the tables have turned with 5G because 5G comes out and everybody's like, oh yeah, this isn't for cellular service. This is for the industry. This isn't for consumers. This is for the industry. Like, go away. Like, LTE's enough for you. 5G's for the industry. And now, no, 5G is for cellular service. like you start using 5G. Wi-Fi 6 is for the industry. And I didn't know that. Like, I've always wondered, like, what does Wi-Fi mean? Because, you hear hi-fi. That means high fidelity.
Right.
What is Wi-Fi's wireless fidelity?
No, it doesn't mean anything. It's just a word.
That's whack.
Just a name. Kind of like Benjamin.
Whack fidelity.
Doesn't mean anything.
Fair enough.
And so, moving on to the next article, Steve. We've been talking about data. You got something on digital waste and Microsoft?
Yeah. So, speaking of all of this data, we need all these, advanced networks because companies are making more data, whether it's for manufacturing or it's for advertising. There's more data being flung around the world, and we need physical hardware, more than hardware, but actual infrastructure, buildings, to support this slinging of data around. And
real quick for the audience, look up the highest concentration of data centers in the U.S., and it's right down the street from where we're currently recording.
Yeah.
So,
and it's really tough for people like me who, would really love to stop paying rent and start paying a mortgage and owning land to live. And I have to, instead of competing with other people, my age or younger, I have to compete with data centers who have a lot more money than me, by the way.
Maybe.
Because data is doing great.
And
data's doing great right now.
And it's really hard to understand the scale until you actually drive past one. When it takes you, there's a couple of highways I'll cut between my where I live to further north, and I pass all the data centers. And
right.
You're doing 40, 50 miles an hour on this road, probably a little faster according to the speed limit. But it takes you several minutes to actually pass the length of the building. I mean, these aren't small buildings. So when you talk about land usage,
they're really creepy because there's no windows on them.
No windows, 2 cars parked in front and a full security system.
Yeah.
So it's pretty entertaining.
At
least for me.
It's ominous.
Because I bought a house already.
Okay, thanks, Ben. But I saw we've seen a few articles come up recently, and I'll have to queue up the other one for the show notes. I have to find it. But there's a concern with all of the smog generated from big data.
Right.
And I saw an article a couple weeks ago about the infinite cloud.
Sure.
Isn't a thing.
Right.
It is finite, number one, but what is infinite is the amount of smog these data centers are producing to bring you as much content as possible, whether it's advertising or something you actually want.
Right.
Which is wild to me. And you brought up, which had me bring in this article, that Microsoft is doing something special with their data centers.
Yep.
And not just special for data and the environment, but also for me. And Ben, what's the most awesome thing about the ocean? What's great about the ocean?
You can pee in it.
It's the perfect place for e-waste and de-waste. Microsoft has experimented with putting data centers in the ocean.
Yeah, that's cool.
They're only unsightly to scuba divers, nerds. Good luck with the bends, loser. They're only unsightly to scuba divers, and it's the perfect environment because you have a constant circulation of cooling.
That's true, yeah.
And that's just really great to me because they're trying to keep land free
and harvest natural cooling energy as opposed to trying to use coal or whatever the U.S. Energy sources are in the U.S. To cool these. And that's probably the biggest thing, right? It's cooling of the electronics. And
Sure.
I thought that was a very good test. And it's interesting, the article that you see is them actually lifting the server back out into into space, and you can see everything on the outside just growing on it. So
all the barnacles.
I love me some barnacles. So I thought it was a very fun experiment and very useful test on how do we repurpose the land we're living in.
Yeah.
And,
I also really like that they came up with that term de-waste. And I'm only kidding about like the ocean stuff. Like there's a huge problem. Like it's crazy that we have like a land mass the size of Texas swirling around in our oceans.
Yep.
That is essentially nothing but e-waste and our plastic garbage. And throwing it in the ocean is not the solution. Throwing it in space, on the other hand, like get it out there, and we can do the same thing with data eventually. What do you think? What do you think quantum entanglement's going to be implemented for? Putting all of our data in space.
Now, so the lesson learned that I have here is the big takeaway here is that for me, like if Microsoft's willing to experiment this, what can we do as within our own office building to positive and work in the environment that we live in, right? So it's not just we work in a 9-story building. How can we positively influence the environment around us and not destroy it? So a lot of manufacturers are going to like solar panels for energy usage, and that strategy makes a lot of sense. But also, they're still consuming a lot of water. They're still consuming a lot of cooling. They're still consuming a lot of energy around the facility. So energy usage has been the biggest shift. Can we get to solar? Can we get to turbine power? But also, if we start taking a look at the different layers within the organization, what other ways can we harness the natural environment for energy reduction? So that was a cool takeaway. I appreciate that, Microsoft. And Steve.
Good job, Microsoft.
The article I want to transition to is called "Walk This Way," which I enjoy a good title pun.
Yes.
This is published from Syracuse University, syracuse.edu, so it's official. And the New York City Fire Department made headlines of hiring 2 prize recruits. They didn't hire firefighters. Well, I guess technically they did, but they purchased firefighters by buying 2
Slavery's wrong.
buying 2 quadruped AMRs.
Robot dogs.
So it's a shift in. We've been talking about Spot and different use cases from Boston Dynamics. I think they were using a different company for this, but it's a very interesting use case where they're still exploring AMRs to put those in places of danger where humans can avoid. So they're talking about crawling into collapsed buildings to help identify and retrieve victims or injured people, and detect radiological and nuclear materials and toxic gas. So basically putting all kinds of sensors to say, hey, canary, is there something dangerous in this tunnel? So I thought that was a very interesting, straightforward article. And, the reason I like the article is because it does talk about the development of new technology. So they do talk about the development of this at the university and how, the trials and tribulations that kind of walk through, and, the development cycle of, our earlier discussion of car dynamics. The first thing is, what are the dynamics of this AMR, of this object, right? How does it move around? How does it articulate its legs? And when it is moving, what is the motion dynamics of the object? And we talked about high side versus low side, right? As it moves around, right? So the motion dynamics and how the robot learns about itself, and incorporating a lot of machine learning applications. So there's positive reinforcement on improving its efficiency. And then getting to practical applications. So, this guy developed this cool thing. Now, how am I going to use it in the world, right? So, I thought the article does a pretty good job of kind of putting all that together and, kicking it off with a very interesting use case. Because I do like the ability of, identifying places where humans are at danger and saying, we don't need a human there. Just put something else.
Right.
Send a robot dog.
This is a perfect segue.
Oh, yeah?
By the way. So it's awesome that the firefighters the fire departments are doing this. And it's good that they're doing this first because, nobody ever has a problem with the firefighters.
Sure.
Nobody's going to look at a firefighter and be like, oh, you baby killer. No, they're saving babies and kitties out of trees and stuff like that. It's great. Maybe the robot dogs will be scaring the kittens into trees. But one thing that has popped into the news recently, San Francisco natives and locals are absolutely losing their minds, as they always do, about the San Francisco Police Department has announced that they are going to authorize police robots with, under certain circumstances where there's no other option that can be used, the power of the use of deadly force.
That's interesting because I consider California very human-centric.
Yeah.
And this is the exact opposite to some degree.
Well, you would think that, but to be fair, they're not the first ones to do it. Like, there's a huge, in our industry, especially with the robot people, including Boston Dynamics and other people we know that we won't name, that are super anti-weaponizing automation.
Sure.
And it is the dumbest and most immature take on it ever. Allow me to get on my soapbox. Here's the thing. Let's go back to the main topic, the San Francisco Police Department. First off, calm down, California. Trust me, Texas did it first.
Of course.
Back in 2016, like a solid 6 years ago, an active shooter in, I think, Dallas. It doesn't matter. All Texas is the same. That's not true at all. But like an active shooter somewhere in Texas near a university opens fire on a crowds of protesters and police officers trying to maintain the protest.
Sure.
And this guy did not have any discretion. He was like, doesn't matter which side of the argument you're on, you're getting shot at. And this dude unloaded several hundred rounds of ammunition. By the time SWAT arrived, this guy retreated into a building that was under construction. I think it was a dorm. So, nobody was safe because bullets are going through that thin, awful sheetrock of the dorm.
Yep.
And this guy retreated into this building that's under construction down a long hallway with absolutely no cover down it. I'm no tactician, but this is called the fatal funnel, meaning the SWAT officers, to arrest this guy, would have no other choice other than to throw themselves in harm's way to get advanced down this hall and be shot at. This would genuinely, like without question, this would generate more loss of life.
Right.
So they obviously, nobody wants to do that, and they've got this guy cornered. They've got to stop this before the guy figures something else out to do to cause mayhem. So they can't just wait it out and wait for the guy to run out of food and die of hunger or something. They've got to go get him now. So what do? They get the EOD, the bomb department, the bomb division of their SWAT, and they have a robot.
Sure.
And they do the opposite of what an EOD robot does. Instead of defusing a bomb, they put a bomb on the robot.
Right.
And send the robot down the hall. You can't shoot a robot to death.
Sure.
So the robot just advances down the hall, gets up close to the active shooter who's on the other side of a wall, and they detonate the bomb, and it neutralizes the threat.
Sure.
Happy ending. This guy's taken care of,
Right.
and now they can do cleanup. It would not necessarily happy ending. It's still awful no matter what.
Right.
But there's less awfulness with the way that this ended.
Right.
And it's just like get over yourself. In some ways, arming a robot means that there's gonna be less loss of life. And this whole childish mentality of we shouldn't weaponize automation. One of my favorite counter arguments to this is, what do you think a heat-seeking missile is? What do you think an AIM-9X is? That's a suicide drone with a rocket pack.
That's true. Right.
A heat-seeking missile, it's the pilot of a fighter jet locks onto another fighter jet, or if it's an AGM, an air-to-ground munition, there's soldiers on the ground. They target a tank. That tank is moving and rolling around, causing mayhem to the soldiers.
Yep.
And the air support gets a lock from the ground troops, and they fire an AGM, and before anti-air can shoot down that plane, they get out of there because it's fire and forget.
Right.
That missile is an automated munition.
Yep.
That was programmed by somebody to destroy something. It's all it is just a drone that has a job to get from point A to point B, and it's just carrying an explosive charge, or in some cases, like the brimstone doesn't have an explosive charge at all because it's that accurate.
It's kinetic.
It's just kinetic, and it has a rocket booster.
Yep.
It's a really fast suicide drone. And that is weaponized automation. And let's think about automation in the beginning. If you go back to the American Precision Museum, one of my favorite places to visit in the American manufacturing industry, it shows that not the assembly line, but automated manufacturing, mass production began with the U.S. government making a request to speed up the production of small arms like muskets and rifles. And not only do that, but muskets and rifles at the time were made of all hand-fit parts.
Sure.
You and I both know that's awful. Right. That's an awful firearm. That's an awful platform to have everything hand-fit. If something breaks, you need to be able to get another part in there as soon as possible with as little to no gunsmithing as possible. So the American Precision Museum, our industry was founded on the development of automating the manufacturing of small arms for the U.S. government.
Sure.
It's not, we need, weaponizing automation, weaponizing robots is not the problem. Automation stemmed from making weapons.
So the reason I appreciate both sides of the argument, because I hear, the manufacturer designers, and this is not a new discussion, right?
It's not.
This discussion occurred long time ago when...
Long before Terminator 2.
Large companies...
Skynet and Cyberdyne, it's not real. It's not coming for you.
Large companies making a technology, and they happen to be a defense or, weaponization of this technology, or use in defense or police forces, right? And it's an interesting take on it because it's... The black and white discussion of it is it's a technology and they don't want that technology to be hurting people, which is fine. But one thing that there's two sides, and I appreciate your take on it because I appreciate the view from California and the application in Texas, that in the end it comes down to the human making the decision to use that technology.
Yes.
And I think we're missing that in the discussion of should we do this, right? And I think, empowering the decision making and holding the decision makers accountable is something we're missing a lot. And to your point of launching a rocket and forgetting, that comes down to the pilot and the human making that decision. And I think, in the broader discussion of things, we are losing sight of, we're very focused on the technology as opposed to there's still a human involved. There's still a human that says we need to do this thing. And what is the closed loop cycle for holding that human accountable, or that process or system of humans involved in that thing? Because we are talking about humans in dangerous, in extreme circumstances, right? The active shooter you mentioned in Texas, and then we talking about earlier example of the fire department, right? Do you want a human to go in there with a sensor to see if there's nuclear waste or if there's toxic fumes, or when you can send a dog, right? So if you extract that to the police force, how do we hold the police force accountable for making the decisions?
Right.
And I do see the argument of where the humans outside the decision-making process, that's a little scary.
Yeah.
But how do we move past that?
Right. And it's like, and that you kind of you kind of touch on the argument, well, okay, maybe we need to defund the police. And it's like, no, nobody wants to defund the police.
Right.
Because the people who want to defund the police are also the same people that are first to call the police.
Sure.
And there's no shame in that. What there is shame in is your message.
Right.
What you want to do is demilitarize the police.
Right.
Because what you're getting out of saying defunding is because police departments, the idea is that they think police departments are spending all of their money on buying toys instead of buying training.
Sure.
And because they're not the military. Their job is to protect and serve,
right.
not patrol and secure.
And I think we're stretching a little bit our conversation
Sure.
from technology. And I do think there's
But I'm getting back to it, I swear to God.
There is a cultural aspect about training and the ethics of technologies. And there has been a lot of discussions on artificial intelligence and ethics also.
Right.
And there is a lot of, when you're training a model, an AI model or a machine learning model, there's automatically biases built into that. And there's there's a huge environment of ethics in technology. And to be honest, to your point, Steve, I think where we're seeing is a shift into the conversation of ethics in technology a little bit more.
And why I'm so supportive of technology is because a police officer whose job is to protect and serve isn't the job of a soldier to patrol and secure.
Right.
They're not trained the same way as military, although in some cases they should be, and in some cases they are, like SWAT.
Right.
But when it comes to your standard police officer that isn't necessarily trained for a combat situation, a lot of the things that the police get in trouble for is because they are acting on fear.
Sure.
They are feared. They are fearful of their lives, of their livelihood, of dying. And if you take that equation out, which you can do that by putting the person behind a computer and a robot in the place instead, then there's no risk to a robot being damaged or destroyed other than money. There's not a loss of human life. Then the person who's controlling said robot can be more careful, can be more... And that's what I think, the demilitarization is the better term than defunding. We don't want that.
Steve, the second to last...
This got heavy.
Second to last episode for the year got really heavy at the end there.
Yeah.
You feel good?
I don't know. Listen. I don't know. I'm not.
Okay.
Don't listen.
We'll talk about it later.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate everyone.
What do you people think? Like, share, subscribe, and comment down below.
Where can they find more info to yell at you about this episode?
Write your complaints on the back of a $100 bill and send it to 7901 Jones Branch Drive, McLean, Virginia 22102. No, but seriously, and for more information, you can learn and hear more rants, not quite like this, at amtonline.org/resources.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye, everybody.
Have fun getting off your soapbox.
Don't hate me too much.